Hello and welcome to another video by Rick Miracle Me in my series Freemasonry and Satanism. Freemasonry into the occult, the Theosophist Society, Rosicrucians, and FYI, all of these organizations, Mystery School of Babylon into the Kabbalah, occult, magic, witchcraft, I like to make it for short, so everybody can understand it. They all acknowledge that Jesus Christ was real. But how many people realize that? Even the people into witchcraft, apparently afraid of Jesus, afraid of God, the Father, Son, the Holy Ghost, the spiritual realm. The realm where apparently 1/3 of the angels were cast out of. So anyways, I talk a lot about the occult. The spiritual realm. We're all spiritual beings in these biological bodies, material bodies. And we all know we have electrical impulses in our body. It's how the cells communicate, how the cells feed. It's kind of interesting if you study that stuff. Holistic healing, all that stuff. And I've read Richard Gruber's big thick books, a couple of them. And I've gone over a lot of psychic research. So when I say Freemasonry and Satanism and people don't want to believe in the devil, well, let me ask a fair question. Do people believe in that they are spiritual beings? And there's enough evidence to go, you can go out there and get books about even children who die in the hospital and come back, 6 years old, 7 years old, and tell about the tunnel and the bright light and the relatives that were there that said it's not your time yet. Some people even have died and gone there, and God, they said, told them it wasn't their time yet. Throughout history, there have been prophets, seers. And in the 1800s, 1840 to 1940, a lot of people in the United States and the world were into seances and table rappings and people who have heard about ghosts. So the point being, there appears to be a spiritual realm. And for whatever reason, being fair here, me, and I think other people would think so, are fortunate enough to come into this realm and experience this material life as a human. Now, some people say it's not fair. Why did somebody be born a native Mexican Indian and live a life largely full of hunger? And then somebody else is born to royalty in London and lives in opulence. Women, wine, food, everything they ever need, overabundance, and then of course they're not very generous and they don't have a tendency to want to share. So we really have a topsy-turvy world here. But I talk about the occult a lot, and I've talked about psychic research a lot, witchcraft a lot. The series is named Freemasonry and Satanism, and Freemasonry is certainly into the Kabbalah and the Helena Blavatsky's Theosophist Society and the Zionists and all this are into this occult Kabbalah, witchcraft stuff with Isis, Osiris, Horus, the all-seeing eye on the U.S. $1 bill, and of course they wanted to build those temples of Baal, arches of Baal, the two poles with a little archway, and that's the devil, Baal, B-A-A-L, and the grand opening for that tunnel in the Swiss Alps, Switzerland, with the seriously demonic with the horns ritual grand opening show. So I thought for this series, this number 93, is we would take a little peek into the mystique, the occult, magic, if you will, in Mexico, and via the use of the peyote button. And to go into a trance and meet some being called Mescalito, an ally. Somebody who will protect you and help you in life. Taking the peyote and doing the initiation, learning how to do it properly. I wouldn't recommend any foolish people to go order some peyote buttons online and start popping them. Apparently it can be quite deadly. And as we have read in some of my other book reviews, even Alice Bailey, or I'll have to get the books again, remember the names, but there are many warnings, even by remote viewers working for the government, leaving their body. Tim Rifat, David Morehouse, Ingo Swann. They say when you leave your body and you go into that other realm, you've got to be careful. Some of those beings are beasts, monsters, dangerous. So again, when you think about Jesus, teaching, preaching, treat others how you want to be treated, which to me is something logical. And then that one time he's on a mountaintop with two of his disciples, and there are two beings there, apparently Moses and Isaiah, looking like spiritual beings. And the two disciples said, well, would you like us to be excused while you talk to these two spiritual looking beings? Moses and Isaiah, who had died years ago. And then apparently a dark cloud comes over there. This is in the Bible. And a voice comes from the cloud. Apparently God's voice. He says, this is my son. Listen to him. This is my son, of whom I am very proud of. Or something like that, paraphrasing. Listen to him. So here's this God coming in this cloud with this thunderous voice, that Jesus was his son, and he's proud of him, and we should listen to him. So people go, well, you know, that's a little out there, Rick. Well, how far out is it than believing in that you're a spiritual being, and when you die, your spirit's going to leave your body, and you're going to go to that realm? Or possibly you're going to go to the realm where the 1/3 of the angels, Lucifer and his associates, using modern terms, his gang, wherever God cast them out to. I suppose people who joined the Luciferian team. Not that I'm trying to be religious here. This book I'm going over now is not about that. But it is about trying to understand this other realm that is prevalent all around us, all over the planet. It has been there. It'll always be there. You can't make it go away. As long as people are born with souls. And apparently, according to the Theosophists, the Kabbalists, and some of these New Age groups, the Rosicrucians and Freemasons and Zionists and witchcraft people, they don't like all we, the people, human beings with souls coming to Earth. Apparently they're trying to bring about some kind of endgame, some new paradigm, some ascension. So if you think all that's kind of unbelievable, let me tell you what this book is. Carlos Castaneda. I'm trying to pronounce his name right. The author of the bestseller, The Art of Dreaming. And the name of this book is A Separate Reality. Further Conversations with Don Juan. Now, I don't want to infringe on copyright laws. I'm going to read just a portion I've selected. It kind of tells a story. I want to encourage people to go buy his books. And look how many books there is. So you can pause your computer and take a look at those. And here it says right here, A Journey into the Heart of Magic with Carlos Castaneda. And again, pardon my pronunciation of how to pronounce his name. One can't exaggerate the significance of what Castaneda has done. The New York Times. Wow. One can't exaggerate. So I'm going to read you some of the openings here. In the teachings of Don Juan, a Yaqui way of knowledge for the Yaqui Indians in Mexico, Carlos Castaneda published the account of his 5-year apprenticeship to Don Juan, a 70-year-old Yaqui Indian, Y-A-Q-U-I, again, pardon my pronunciation if I'm doing it wrong, known as a brujo, a medicine man, cura, sorcerer. So I guess a sorcerer could also be called a witch. A cura could be called a healer. A medicine man, well, people who know how to use herbs and all that other stuff. In it, he told of the uses of peyote, Jimson weed, and other hallucinogenic plants, and opening the doors of perception to a world of non-ordinary reality, completely beyond the concepts of Western civilization. So completely beyond the concepts of the average person in the United States of America, and probably Europe, etc. But probably not so strange to the Peruvians, natives, or the Aborigines, or many other natives all over the world who have shamans and medicine men, and also called sorcerers and curers. And we've gone over this, and we're going to go over some, the ones in Peru. I want to do another book review on that one. It's so fascinating. But I thought we'd dwell on the Mexico one when I discovered this guy recently and ordered this book recently. Inching my way towards understanding the other reality that exists all around us. The teachings of Don Juan have since become acknowledged classic, discovered by hundreds of thousands of readers and hailed by the New York Times as an extraordinary spiritual and psychological document. So don't believe me? Believe what I'm going to read and my conversation about what I think about it. And of course, thank you for watching my video. But you formulate what you want to think about it. Maybe it'll help you and other people to kind of rationalize or understand this world we're in right now in 2016 July, and the potential, it seems, for some kind of catastrophic event brought about intentionally to bring about a new world order. And as Albert Pike said, 3 world wars would be needed to accomplish the new world order. And with the Theosophist Society and the occultism in the United Nations apparently under the control of these mystery school of Babylon occultic witchcraft people, we can further get a grip on what we're talking about here. Are all these beings and spirits and angels or demons, are some of them just downright dangerous? Do they hate humanity? The answer is apparently yes, if you read the Bible. As a Christian religion, from my point of view, I'm sure if I could have an interesting conversation with a Muslim, an Islam person, or even a Orthodox, God-believing, good Jewish person, I'm not so sure I would have an agreeable conversation with a Luciferic, Reformed, Zionist Jewish person who wants to rule the world and thinks the rest of us are all goy or goyim, which means cattle. Born to be their slaves, so they say. And I have to re-release that one video I made about Professor Higger's book, The Jewish Utopia, as the ultimate New World Order. What was his name, the author? I'll re-release it. But this guy was an ex-CIA operative working for the government, retired military, and became an investigator after that, and started writing newsletters, magazines, and then a book. So I want to re-release that, but everything in a sequence. Determined to go deeper still into Don Juan's world of mystical sensation and perception, Castaneda recounts how he learned to see beyond the surface realities of life, partly with the aid of drugs, but finally and essentially through his supremely difficult and demanding effort of intelligence and will. One can't exaggerate the significance of what Castaneda has done. He is describing the shamanistic tradition, a pre-logical culture form that is no one knows how old. It has been described often, but it seems that no other outsider, certainly not a Westerner, has ever participated in the mysteries from within, nor has anyone described them so well. Well, I hope I do justice with my analysis and reading. The anthropologist, so he was an anthropologist, rescue of an alien language from oblivion becomes a moving personal quest and autobiography. Roger Jeninek, New York Times. And again, so I don't infringe on anybody's copyrights and go the extra mile to share who and what, published by these people. So if you can go buy the book, I would probably, I'm only going to read a portion of it. I read the first 100 pages. Highlighted some stuff, as you can see. So I'm going to try to do a short synopsis of the first maybe 50 pages, and then actually get to the meat of the story I want to share. So when was this book published? Washington Square Press, published by Pocket Books. New York, London, Toronto, Sydney, Tokyo, Singapore. So please, if I'm going to give any financial benefit here, this seems like a really good book to go buy. This was published in 1971. So we know, like with the Vatican, the Pope, the Catholic Church. Catholic means, by the way, universal. So the universal church, if you want to call it what Catholic means. The universal church with the Pope, whose throne apparently originally was Caesar, the leader of Roman Empire. And apparently, many years ago, 1500, 16, 17, 1800 years ago, Jesus' teachings were becoming popular. And Jesus of Nazarene was his name. It wasn't Jesus Christ. Christ means anointed one. So anyways, Rome was falling apart, losing its control over people. Jesus' teachings were growing. People were becoming followers and liked the teaching, treat others how you want to be treated. So they had something in 340 AD after Christ, 340 years. Something about the Constantine and some kind of meeting at Nazarene. Anyways, they all got together and negotiated a deal to adopt Jesus as Jesus Christ and the new Christian religion with the Pope. And of course, then they had crusades and people who were heretics or wouldn't join the church. Particularly speaking, the Muslim Arabs, when they were trying to retake or take Jerusalem 8 times in 300 years, from 1000 to 1300. And it seems to me it was largely just about obtaining a lot of wealth. As John Robinson wrote in his book Dungeon, Fire, and Sword that I've gone over, and I'll be releasing that video again. So, in the name of religion, and a lot of people out there are anti-religious because of what I'm going to say next. In the name of religion, a lot of death and mayhem and murder, even when they went down to Central America, Mexico, Peru, all over South America, North America. The natives were massacred. The gold and other stuff was stolen by these same churches. Now that doesn't mean that Jesus didn't arrive and the Pharisees were jealous, had him crucified, and he rose from the dead, that he was a spiritual being. When you see what I'm going to read in this book. So just because some people, like the Vatican, used and abused the teachings of Jesus for their own gain, and certainly doesn't mean a lot of people who are Catholics are evil. They don't know this stuff. But isn't that the way it is with the government in the USA right now, and probably all over Europe? Pierre Manat, who conspired with some other people to form the European Union. And if you take Pierre Manat's name and you put it into a numerology calculator, it's 666. I could go on and on and on about peoples whose name are 666 who are just evil people to me. Kissinger is 666 in a numerology calculator. Newt Gingrich, for some of the things he did, I just knew he was. I'm intuitive. It means things come to me. I've learned how to go with the least path of resistance. When I try to do something, obstacles pop up. It's almost like I look up, I go, I get it, okay, I'll go the other way. So Newt Gingrich, I put it in the calculator, Newt Gingrich, Newton Gingrich, whatever. I could not get 666. Just the point here. So finally I didn't give up. I went on Wikipedia. He was adopted. His name was Newton McPherson. McPherson was 666 in a numerology calculator. Go look it up. Just type in numerology calculator, there come up, go to Wikipedia, Newt Gingrich. Monsanto is 666. Computer is 666. So many words. Witchcraft, I think. There's a whole list of these things where you find a numerology calculator. There's a long list of all these words. So this is another thing about words. Words are powerful. And even in the beginning in Genesis, God spoke the words and created the reality we have. I suppose even you could call software programs on laptops and iPhones and all that, all those codes are words. All the DNA are all designed words by an infinitely more intelligent being than this human that I am and the other people are. So who created all this? It's an interesting question. People have been asking that for thousands of years. Sorry I'm dragging this out. But the point is, what are these people, these Freemasons and Satanists and Zionists and Kabbalists and the designs in the courtrooms and these temples, arches of Baal and that ceremony over there in Switzerland for the demonic satanic show, the rituals like an Indiana Jones movie, the beating the drums and throwing people into the fire and stuff like that. The Bohemian Grove that Alex Jones videoed, you can go online and see. The Bilderberger Group and all these other secret organizations conspiring behind the scenes to bring about some other paradigm or reality. They know what I'm about to read. Look at the Vatican, the Catholic Church, years ago burning the Library of Alexandria. When they went into Mexico City, the Ponce de Leon types and the Mayflower ship types way back then, they made a beeline to the shaman's hut, got all his knowledge, proceeded to kill him, take all the gold, and proceeded to start killing all the natives. 1971. So, part 1, part 2, the preliminaries of seeing, and part 2, the task of seeing. So what is seeing? What is seeing? From what I have learned, and like I said, I'll try to do a brief synopsis reading this book. What I see when I look at myself in this video, or the trees and leaves behind me, and other people when I walk down the street, is normal sight. Now, people who are psychic, or take the ashkawushka drug in Peru, I'm saying that wrong, or the peyote in Mexico, or the opium or the heroin over there in Vietnam, Thailand, China, India. All over the world they have these different drugs that they take, the shamans, to go in these meditative states and go into this other world, which apparently is right here around me, and see differently than what I see right now. So that's called being able to see, or perception. And apparently when these people can see, and apparently animals have this ability, they don't see a face and a hair and color like I'm looking at myself right now, or you're looking at me. They see like an auric thing, an aura, a glow. And they can tell the difference between kindness or evil or hatred or danger when they see people. And they can see people walking down the street who aren't really normal people. Not everybody. Look at that picture there. Not everybody in your city street is a normal human like you or I. Don Juan, he called this medicine man Shama in Mexico, northwestern Mexico. And he's the Indian who knows all about peyote. Bill had told me that the man was a yarbero, a person who gathers and sells medicinal herbs, and that he knew a great deal about hallucinogenic cactus peyote. He had also said that it would be worth my while to meet him. Bill was my guide to the Southwest while I was collecting information and specimens of medicinal plants used by the Indians of the area. So he meets this Don, and Mr. Don says, "I am Don Mattis at your service," he said. So I'm skipping, I only read one line there. I'm going to try to tell a story. And I did go by the pharmacy and printed out some mescalito, this being, and peyote, and related photographs, pictures, that I got off of. I want to give credit where credit is due here. Again, no infringement of copyright laws. But if you go on Yahoo image site, and you put in peyote or mescalito, you will see all these pictures, and there'll be a link to what site they came from. I'm just going to use them as a flash and show them to make my point, and I want you to know where to find them and give credit to the authors and creators of the artwork and the photos, but they are necessary for me to get my point across in my story. So anyways, here's a couple sentences. "Do you know anything about the world around you?" he asked. This would have been Don Juan, the Shama. And of course, Carlos Castaneda said, "I know all kinds of things," I said. "I mean, do you ever feel the world around you?" "I feel as much of the world around me as I can," Carlos says. Don Juan says, "That's not enough. You must feel everything. Otherwise, the world loses its sense." So I'm just trying to get this story that I'm going to get out on this video across, because people just don't know what to believe. In 1961, a year after our first meeting, Don Juan disclosed to me that he had secret knowledge of the medicinal plants. He told me he was a brujo. The Spanish word for brujo can be rendered in English as sorcerer, medicine man, or cura. And again, I like to use the word witchcraft, so most of us Westerners get the point. So I became his apprentice and spent the next 4 years. He endeavored to teach me the mysteries of sorcery, witchcraft. Now again, I am not totally opposed to shamas all over the world, from the ancient traditions of being able to do this stuff to be helpful to the tribe, healing people and solving problems, etc. But not all beings that are chosen to be shamans are nice people. And if they want to use those powers for evil purposes, therein lies the problem with all these Freemasons, Illuminati, Zionist types, and all these black op programs run by the CIA, FBI, and the Mossad of Israel, including 911, so they could go over there and overthrow all the countries in the Middle East, which in the news today, John Kerry and a bunch of leaders from 40 different nations are now preparing to go in there and further destroy the Islamic State. They call ISIL or ISIS. While they're causing all this chaos and anarchy and just distraction material here in the United States, they're continuing to mass slaughter all those people And there's these plans. You can go and look up Zionism and the Greater Israel. Look up those words. But apparently from the Euphrates to the Nile, it's almost half the size of the United States. But it includes Syria, Iraq, a lot of Saudi Arabia, which apparently is being run by a Jewish family now anyways. And they have nukes and something called the Samson option. If anybody tries to stop them, they're going to fire the nukes and take the whole world down in flames. The Samson option, look it up. Let me get back to the Carlos and Don Juan, the Shama, the sorcerer, medicine man, and cura. He would use the terms knowledge to categorize sorcery, the man of knowledge. So sorcery can also mean man of knowledge, or one who knows, to categorize the sorcerer. In order to teach and collaborate his knowledge, Don Juan used 3 well-known psychotropic plants: peyote, Jimson weed. I'm going to have to look up and see what that looks like. And a species of mushroom which belongs to the genus Cyclocybe. Through the separate ingestion of each of these hallucinogens, he produced in me, as his apprentice, some particular states of distorted perception or altered consciousness, which I have called states of non-ordinary reality. So you take these drugs and you see reality around you differently. I didn't know this either, but it was in the news today on the New York Times and a newspaper, which I purchased today because of some of the stuff that was in there with Donald Trump and all this other craziness. But apparently, opium or whatever, all this stuff is epidemic proportions. People are heroin addicts. And they passed some law about sharing needles. I guess you can turn in your needles and the state will give you new clean needles to try to prevent disease. But apparently this heroin addiction is off the chart. I'm glad it's not in my reality, but when you read this stuff, you really gotta wonder. And taking over Afghanistan and having all those poppy crops, making tons of money, and opium addiction is off the chart. And the CIA in the past has been responsible for bringing this in, and other organizations called the government. They're doing the drug trade, probably the marijuana trade, the powers that run our country. Just saying. I was looking at that in the paper, in the New York Times, I go, oh my God. Who knows that heroin addiction is out of control right now? Moving on. Don Juan behaved towards these states of non-reality, not as if they were real, but as they are real. Don Juan understood and explained the plants as being vehicles that would conduct or lead a man to certain impersonal forces or powers, and the states they produced as being the meetings that of the sorcerer had to have with those powers in order to gain control over them. So when you take the drug, you can see these beings in this other reality, and apparently you can order them to do things. He called peyote mescalito. He explained as it being a benevolent teacher and protector of man. Mescalito taught the right way to live. Peyote was usually ingested at gatherings of sorcerers called mitotes, where the participants would gather specifically to seek a lesson on the right way to live. Remember, we went over that material in the Rosicrucian and the initiates. And we got all these satanic rituals going on with the Super Bowl halftime shows, the Emmys, Grammys, and BET Awards, Olympic openings, and all this other stuff. The Temple of Baal, United Nations, UNESCO, is sponsoring 1,000 of them all over the world. CERN, the Collider, trying to open up some kind of portal. To open up a portal and see into what? And then we're talking about this world here that people have been doing for thousands of years, taking these different kinds of plants to enter a different state and see that other world. You see how all this connects together? Don Juan considered the Jimson weed and the mushroom to be the powers of a different sort. He called them allies and said that they were capable of being manipulated So taking these drugs, he called them allies, and they were capable of being manipulated. Of the two, Don Juan preferred the mushroom. He maintained that the power contained in it, the mushroom, was his personal ally, and he called it smoke or little smoke. Don Juan's procedure to utilize the mushrooms was to let them dry into a fine powder inside a small gourd. He kept the gourd sealed for a year and then mixed the fine powder with 5 other dry plants to produce a mixture of smoking in a pipe. So he smoked the mushrooms. In order to become a man of knowledge, one had to meet with the ally as many times as possible. One had to become familiar with it. The premise implied, of course, that one had to smoke the hallucinogenic mixture quite often. Don Juan explained the profound effects that the mushrooms had on one's perceptual capabilities as the ally removing one's body. Profound effects that the mushroom had on one's perceptual capacities, as the ally removing one's body. Don Juan's teaching had begun to pose a serious threat to my idea of the world. Duh! You start learning this stuff and your whole Western philosophy that you thought you knew about reality crumbles. It began to lose the certainty which all of us have that the reality of everyday life is something we can take for granted. His premise was that a light or amenable disposition was needed in order to withstand the impact and strangeness of the knowledge he was teaching me. So you need to have a nonchalant attitude, relaxed. But if you start seeing this reality, I'm sure it can make you quite anxious and put you in a dangerous state, from what I read. Feeling important makes one heavy, clumsy. So remember, even when we went over the Rosicrucian initiations, is you had to surrender all your own personal will and seek this other realm and let them take control over you. But if your ego is great, it makes one heavy, clumsy, and in vain. To be a man of knowledge, one needs to be light and fluid. So you need to relax and get rid of your vain ego, egotistical ego. So as an apprentice, he was going to teach me to see Carlos Castaneda. Differences between seeing and looking as 2 distinct manners of perceiving. Looking referred to the ordinary way in which we are accustomed to perceive the world, while seeing entailed a very complex process by virtue of which a man of knowledge allegedly perceives the essence of the things of the world. Now remember, there are psychics who can see anybody's aura. And then there was Mr. Kilnor, the one who wrote that book about auras that I've gone over, I'll show again. And he discovered Dionysine, which was coal dust from a coal mine, mixed with water and fermented a little bit, mixed up, poured between 2 sheets of glass about 1/4 inch thick, like a little window. Coal, dust, and water, dye, called Dionysine, which is illegal now. You can look it up. But anyways, when you looked through this coal, dye, and water mixture, if I was looking through it and I was a doctor, and I was looking at you, I could see your aura, and the different colors describe your health and well-being. And apparently, sometimes there's these spear-like beams coming in your body or out of it, which apparently is indicative of some serious health problem. We'll go over that again. During the second cycle of apprenticeship, Don Juan made a point of assuring me that the use of smoking mixture was an indispensable prerequisite to seeing. Only the smoke can give you the necessary speed to catch a glimpse of the fleeting world. That's an interesting sentence there, because I kind of think I figured out something. And of course, we all know, once you think you figured out something, you find out you're all wrong. But what I think I figured out is this other world does operate on an infinitely higher frequency than this material world that I am. Now remember, if God is of that world, they made this world with all the code on the DNA. Just like when you work on your computer and you do something and you know the bits are moving at millions of gigacycles, it's pretty fast. So apparently when they wrote all this code for this DNA of this reality I'm in, this is a much slower reality. I'm making my voice go slower than those entities or beings you can't see right now. They're at an infinitely higher operating frequency. And apparently, if you take these psychotropic drugs, as shamans do all over the world, you go into a trance-like state and you can see that other dimension and communicate with those beings. Hence, shamans and people like Edgar Cayce and all these other people into witchcraft, including King Solomon and King Solomon's temple, with his six-pointed magic ring, which he could call forth demons. So this has a lot to do with the occultic geometry of triangles, squares, and circles, etc. And words are shapes and forms too. If you speak into a tube that goes up to a little membrane with sand on top or something, and you say certain vowels or consonants, you'll see different shapes. All this stuff starts to come together, so when they say abracadabra or hocus pocus, whatever these incantations that they say, they're doing some kind of magic. And like this book says here, journey into the heart of magic. Just trying to clarify when I keep saying these things, why this book review here is so apropos to the series Freemasonry and Satanism. We need to understand what kind of magic these people who are bent on depopulating the planet and ruling it, like the Jewish Utopia Professor Higger says, and the Protocols of Zion, and the Talmud, and the Zohar, and the Kabbalah, that these people think that they're better than the rest of us, and that we're just goy or goyim or profane or cattle or animals not to be trusted, like H.G. Wells said. They know things we don't know. I'm making these videos so we can know what they know. The difference between seeing and looking is two distinct manners of perceiving. Looking referred to the ordinary way in which we are accustomed to perceive the world, while seeing entailed a very complex process by virtue of which a man of knowledge allegedly perceives the essence of the things of the world. So Don Juan said smoking the mushroom mixture was indispensable prerequisite to seeing. So only the smoke can give you the necessary speed to catch a glimpse of this fleeting world. With the aid of the psychotropic mixture, he produced in me a series of states of non-ordinary reality. What I perceived in those states of altered consciousness was incomprehensible and impossible to interpret by means of our everyday mode of understanding the world. And a lot of people who have investigated this stuff say it's hard to put into words when you see that. And so I did get some pictures made, and when you see the pictures, you're going to go, I've seen those pictures before. Isn't that all that New Age teaching, ascension? It produced a numbness and loss of motor control, so you couldn't control your arms or body or legs. That was interpreted in Don Juan's system of an act performed by the smoke, which in this case was the ally, in order to remove the body of the practitioner. Obviously, there has to be an endless number of possible, sensible interpretations that are pertinent to sorcery that a sorcerer must learn to make. So apparently it is quite the study. Page 10. Don Juan was a practitioner. That is, he was a sorcerer who knew all the steps of his sorcery. Through the use of psychotropic plants and through well-directed contacts between the alien system. So now we know where the aliens are coming from. And there's more to be told here about that. And myself, he succeeded in pointing out to me that my view of the world cannot be final because it is only an interpretation. So all of us who are walking around, going shopping, going to the restaurant, driving our car, we have an interpretation of the world, but there's another reality we are unaware of. But again, all these secret mystery school Freemasons who swear under threat of death and actually murder people to try to keep their secrets. Again, might behoove us to learn a little bit about what reality really is. For the American Indian, perhaps for thousands of years, the vague phenomenon we call sorcery has been a series of bona fide practice, comparable to that of our science. I like to see, he said, because only by seeing can a man of knowledge know. What kinds of things do you see? Carlos asked. Everything. He says, you only look at the surface of things. So most of us who are unaware of this stuff are only looking at the surface of things. So apparently Carlos met this other guy who was a sorcerer. And his eyes opened and I saw his eyes. He seemed to be looking past me. I've heard that before by people who have met people who are into the occult sciences. When they look at you, they look like they're looking right past you. And they are, sort of, because they're not seeing what you see as a physical body. They're seeing maybe something like this glow, this auric thing. So they're not looking at you, they're looking at your aura. They can see things and know things about you that you don't know yourself. After a moment, he dropped his hand to his side, remained motionless, taking a strange position. He was standing, resting on the ball of his left foot. His right foot was crossed behind the heel. So he's resting on the ball of one foot, and his other foot's behind there, standing there in some kind of trance. He was tapping the floor rhythmically, dun, 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 and gently with the tip of his right foot. So this sorcerer was actually doing some kind of ritual dance in front of Carlos Castaneda. I felt an unwarranted apprehension, a form of restlessness. My thoughts seemed to dissociate. I was thinking unrelated, nonsensical thoughts. So these sorcerers, these people with these powers, can do things to we the people. They're dangerous people to interface with unless you know what you're doing. So this guy, this other sorcerer, did not say a word. I didn't know what else to say or do. Quite automatically, I turned around and left. So he went to see this sorcerer that Don Juan had told him to go visit. And the sorcerer stood up and went into a trance and started doing some kind of dance, performing a magical act. Wait till you find out what happens. Sankanta danced, Don Juan said. You saw him. And then he danced. What did he do to me? I felt very cold and dizzy. He apparently didn't like you and stopped you by tossing a word at you. So he put this guy in some kind of uncomfortable feeling. How could he possibly do that? I exclaimed incredibly. Very simply, he stopped you with his will. So these beings, these shamans, magic, witchcraft people. I'm assuming these people are decent people who are working for the tribe. But apparently this one shaman, Sankanta, didn't like Carlos. So he stopped you with his will. And you, of course, you left. You felt very uneasy and you left. What did you say? He stopped you with his will. So Don Juan is explaining to Carlos what that other shaman did to him. Moving on, the system I recorded was incomprehensible to me, Carlos says. Thus, the pretense to anything other than reporting about it would be misleading and impertinent. In this respect, I have adopted the phenomenological method, and have striven to deal with sorcery solely as a phenomenon that were presented to me, I am the perceiver, recorded what I perceived, and at the moment of recording I endeavored to suspend judgment. So Carlos is telling us he's trying to be an unbiased book author, investigator, anthropologist, apparently college graduated, all that, and was just going to go there and be an apprentice and report what he discovered. So part one, we're reaching there now. The preliminaries of seeing. Moving to page 21, and I've read up to 100 pages, and I'm only doing my highlighted portions here, trying to get this story across. What I learned from what Carlos learned from his teacher, the 70-year-old sorcerer Don Juan. After 3 days of watching them go like vultures, after the most meager of leftovers, I became despondent. He was talking about the children in Mexico. And I left that city feeling that there was no hope for these children, whose world was already molded by their day-to-day struggle for crumbs. I'm going to make a video pretty soon about what's going on in Venezuela. I got a lot of pictures. It's just horrific. While the elites got plenty of food and wine and money, in a country with unparalleled resources of oil, gold, and diamonds, it seems somebody wants to depopulate that country. Just saying. Which, by the way, Venezuela, if you go up the Amazon into the backwoods up there, apparently have many tribes who are seriously into this kind of magic. So it might behoove the attackers, the ones who want to destroy humanity, to be careful, because apparently these people do have some powers. Now, what kind of powers do the Freemasons, Illuminati, Zionists, who are into the occult have? Well, when we learn about what's in this book, maybe we'll get a glimpse of the potential danger, trouble we're in, maybe. Do you feel sorry for them? Don Juan exclaimed in a questioning tone. Carlos says, I certainly do. So he's talking about the kids chasing after crumbs of food. Why? Because I'm concerned for the well-being of my fellow man. Those are children, and their world is ugly and cheap. Don Juan says, wait, how can you say that their world is ugly and cheap? Don Juan said, mocking my statement. You think you are better off, don't you? Carlos says, I said I did, and he asked me why. I told him that in comparison to those children's world, mine was infinitely more varied and rich in experiences and in opportunities for personal satisfaction and development. Don Juan's laughter was friendly and genuine. He said that I was not careful with what I was saying, that I had no way of knowing about the richness and the opportunities in the world of those children. I had said that, and I repeat it again, that in my opinion, to become a man of knowledge was one of the greatest intellectual accomplishments. Don Juan says, do you think that your very rich world would ever help you to become a man of knowledge? Don Juan asked with light sarcasm. So we already know in America they're doing something called dumbing down America. And all the propaganda now about the pansexual, bisexual, transgender, and even trying to, I guess, legalize pedophilia and bestiality. We've got some people with some very dark nature controlling the United Nations, trying to bring us a very sick, crazy world, in my opinion. And they are into the occult, and apparently it's some kind of serpent worship. Some beings, like I guess, these shamans know about, because we see the symbol of the snake and dragon and reptilian throughout history on monuments everywhere. Everybody knows that. So what kind of beings are there that are not human? All the men of knowledge I know were kids like those you saw eating leftovers and licking the tables. So Carlos says those kids, people he knew who grew up, started out like those kids, and they're men of knowledge. And you don't have too many people, men of knowledge like so here in the United States, who really can see the true reality, other than the secret mystery schools, Freemasons, Illuminati, Rosicrucians, Kabbalistic people, Zionists, Jesuits, etc., witchcraft people, Church of Satan. They teach something that they know and powers they have that they don't share with the rest of us. And the people who join those societies swear under threat of death they won't divulge that information to the rest of us. So let's get back to the book with Don Juan and Carlos Castaneda. Castaneda, I don't know. I keep trying to say it. And si hablo español, I can speak Spanish pretty good, but it's still twisting my tongue with his last name. Si hablo español? Okay, what's this other mode of seeing? Don Juan asked Carlos. Men look different when you see. The little smoke will help you see men as fibers of light. So if you take these smoking the mushroom, you'll see men as fibers of light, rather than this face, or anybody you're looking at. Fibers of light, asked Carlos. Yes, fibers like white cobwebs. That would be like Kilnor's book on the aura. That looks like white light. Different color, like pink light, blue light, depending on your health and well-being and your nature. And apparently dogs can see this. That's why dogs, to some people, will be really friendly. And other people, they will get vicious. And animals apparently have this perception of being able to see friend or foe. There is another world right all around us that none of us are aware of. And apparently the elites who run our world have been trying to keep this information from us. Very fine threads that circulate from the head to the navel. It's almost like some kind of magnetic field. We've all seen pictures of magnetic fields. Thus a man looks like an egg of circulating fibers. That would be what an aura looks like. An aura looks like a big egg. It's not inside of me. It's like about this big. If you look at Kilner's book about the aura. And his arms and legs are like aluminum bristles bursting out in all directions. Is that the way everyone looks? Everyone, besides every man, is in touch with everything else. So apparently we're all connected, according to this book. Not through his hands, though, but through a bunch of long fibers that shoot out from the center of his abdomen. So in the Kilner's book on the aura, I've seen those spears that come out of light. Those fibers join a man to his surroundings. They keep his balance, they give him stability. So as you may see someday, a man is a luminous egg, whether he's a beggar or a king, and there's no way to change anything. Or rather, what could be changed in that luminous egg? What? So as we all know, we human beings are all the same inside. So people shouldn't be trying to be racist or hurt other people. But I think the dark forces that run our world are trying to create all this racism, divide and conquer tactic for their own personal aim. He said the darkness, as he called it, the darkness of the day, was the best time to see. He stressed the word see with a particular inflection. I know that if you go into a very dark room at night and you take your two fingers like this and you push them together, you can actually feel some kind of gel, and then if you catch it just right, you can see little sparks. There's videos on this. I've done it. I can feel it when I do this. You got to kind of build up a charge, and then it starts to feel really weird on your hands. You can feel it. Just go slow, press, or you can take your hand over somebody else's body, and you can feel the auric field. Feels like jelly. Have somebody lay down and just start, don't touch the skin, go within an inch, a half an inch, and you can feel it. Psychics can see this stuff a lot clearer. So Don Juan says you can see it better in darkness. Moving on, page 25. I pointed out that people attend a minuto to seek the presence of mescalito. So they take the peyote at a little group meeting that's called a minuto, mitote, M-I-T-O-T-E, to seek the presence of mescalito, which is apparently some kind of being in this other world, and his lessons about the right way to live, and that those persons never exchange a word or a gesture among them. So when they go into this trance, Carlos was trying to see what they were doing. He thought it was a big trick. Witchcraft. Anyways, but he couldn't catch him at this thing, so he was getting confused. He writes all that here. So he was looking for some kind of gestures among them, yet they agree about the presence of mescalito and his specific lessons. So when you take the peyote and you go into one of these group sittings and contact the being mescalito, he gives each individual some kind of lesson about the right way to live and the right way to think. And apparently these people are very happy there in northwest and western Mexico and elsewhere as native in their seriously poverty-stricken environment. But they're living almost in a different world than we all are. They're actually living half in this world and half in the spiritual reality. And so they're more knowledgeable about reality than we people are who don't have this experience. Just interpreting it as I best can. In my personal experience, I had found that the form of the individual visit of mescalito and his consequent lesson were striking homogeneous, although varying in content from person to person. So when the people described their interface or meeting mescalito, the stories were similar, and Carlos was just confused. How did they all get together and have the same stories? He thought there was some kind of trick to it, but he couldn't believe it. And Don Juan says there's no trick. Mescalito gives each person a different message, if that's whatever's pertinent to them. So Carlos thinks they're all being cued. Why should anyone cue? Don Juan asked stubbornly. You have been to my totos. You should know that no one told you how to feel or what to do, no one except Mescalito himself. But how can all those persons agree about Mescalito's presence? They agree because they see, Don Juan said dramatically, and then added casually, why don't you attend another mitote, M-I-T-O-T-E, and see for yourself? So apparently Carlos was a little afraid to take the peyote again. Apparently it causes you quite a little bit of distress in your body. John asked me what had become of my interest in peyote. Page 27. And I'm just reading highlighted sentences, so I'm not reading the whole book. If you really have an interest in learning the stuff, buy the book. If you want to know what's going around in your world right now with these people who I say are into the occult, this might help you to realize there's something more to reality than most of us are aware of. But the people who are trying to manipulate our reality with the propaganda in the news, like the 37 cities targeted by the Black Lives Matter leaders, who are probably under the control of the people bringing about the New Age, New World Order, Soros types. It took a lot of money to organize all that. But they wanted to create a day of rage last Friday. And so they're using all this propaganda and perception of reality to kind of mind control the masses. And they know more about reality than we do. So Carlos says, I have failed you. I have run away. I feel I am defeated. Because Carlos did quit for a while. His initiation with Don Juan. You do what you can. Besides, you haven't been defeated yet. What have I to teach you is very hard. I, for instance, found it perhaps even harder than you. And Don Juan says, you ought to let the smoke guide you again, he said forcefully. That'd be smoking those mushroom things. Apparently the peyote, they cut them up into little pieces. Peyote buttons, and you put them in your mouth and you chew them. But apparently they're very hard, and they actually make your mouth bleeding and sore. It's a painful experience the way they chew the peyote. Smoking the mushroom might be easier. No, Don Juan, I can't use your smoke anymore. I think I have exhausted myself, says Carlos. You haven't begun. I am too afraid. So you're afraid. There is nothing new about being afraid. Don't think about your fear. Think about the wonders of seeing. I sincerely wish I could think about those wonders, but I can't. When I think of your smoke, I feel a sort of darkness coming upon me. It is as if there were no more people on the earth, no one to turn to. Your smoke has shown me the ultimate of loneliness, Don Juan. And again, I'm reading my highlighted portions, so I'm just jumping down, throwing in my comments to explain all that I read and understood. Unless affected by some outside force, Don Juan said. That's about the best word you've found. I told you already only a crackpot would undertake the task of becoming a man of knowledge of his own accord. A sober-headed man has to be tricked into doing it. So you got to be careful if you want to try to get into this world of knowledge. Through the very artful manipulations, Don Juan had once forced me into a direct and terrifying confrontation with a woman reported to be a sorceress. The clash resulted in a profound animosity on her part. So I don't think you want to tick off a sorceress, which Don Juan exploited my fear of the woman as motivation to continue with the apprenticeship, claiming that I had to learn more about sorcery in order to protect myself against her magical onslaughts. Exactly my point while I'm reading this material. Can the people that are into the occult, that are bringing about the new age, that swear under threat of death that they won't divulge the secrets, can they perform witchcraft incantations and other things to harm us? And then, of course, now they have all those, and I'm going to go over this in a New World Order video coming up next. But apparently the government has been caught driving around with microwave transmitters in vehicles, experimenting on neighborhoods and highways and cities and people as a weapon here in the United States. And the HARP transmissions and the sky spraying of chemicals. So anyways, Don says, don't worry, he said reassuringly. Tricks with fear won't work with you anymore. You're no longer afraid. But if it is needed, you can be tricked wherever you are. You don't have to be around here for that. So Don Juan is telling the Carlos, who says he's afraid to do this anymore, that I know I tricked you before, and you're getting smart, but if I wanted to trick you, you don't have to even be in my presence for me to trick you, to do something I want you to do. Page 32. It's damned important, he said. Vincenti is a first-rate sorcerer. He gave you something to plant because he had his reasons. And if you encountered 3 people who seemed to have popped out of nowhere right after you had planted it, there was a reason for that too. Only a fool like you would disregard the incident and think it wasn't important. So I read that. I just skipped a few pages. But apparently Don Juan had Carlos go visit a very important sorcerer named Vincente. And it was a strange meeting. And Vincente gave Carlos something to go with him. He said, here's some seeds. I need you to go to this place. I need you to plant them. A remote place off the highway. So Carlos did as he was told. And when he turned around, there were two men and a woman sitting on his car. And as he went back to his car, they started to accost him, trying to force him to give them money and a ride and everything else. So he had to almost fight them off and try to get away. And Don Juan says they weren't real beings, that these mescalito type interdimensional beings that you can see when you're under these drugs can reappear anywhere and in any kind of form they want to. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, am I really reading this? Is this what they're talking about, aliens? That people say, these abductions by people entities that can walk through the walls? And if they do try to abduct somebody, when they call out in Jesus' name, you can go look this up on the internet. People have claimed this story, that in Jesus' name, the aliens dropped him like a hot potato. Like they were afraid of calling to Jesus for help. And I do know from my research that as human beings, we can have parasitic entities attached to us. We don't know it, and we start feeling grumbly and tired and dragged down. But apparently they feed off of our energy. And other ones put thoughts in our heads they call temptational thoughts. And in the Lord's Prayer, the last two sentences, or one sentence, do not please lead me not into temptation and deliver me from evil. So it's right there. People need to be on guard for this temptation and these thoughts. You may think they're yours, they might not be. And then the parasitic entities, that if you can get into these tempting thoughts and tempting sinful actions, apparently you're inviting these entities into your soul. You can get possessed, from my research. But anyways, my point of this conversation, if you want to get rid of these evil, dark beings that may enshroud you, if you think you're under some kind of threat, and there's a lot of people who, it's been a rash of possession going on all over the world lately. So apparently there's some kind of rise of dark beings on the planet right now, according to my research. But if you can say in Jesus' name, you can talk to God and demand that the spiritual beings, if there are any attached to you, or parasitic entities that'll feed off of your energy, you can demand they leave. And you can use reflexology with your finger or a pendulum. I use reflexology with my finger. And ask if there are any parasitic entities attached to me or any spiritual beings attacking me. And sometimes I get a yes, and I demand that they leave in Jesus' name. And if they do not leave, I ask Jesus to escort them away from me and punish them. And apparently, calling out in Jesus' name forces these beings to leave you alone. I've got a lot more stuff to share that I've researched over these years. And that's some of the stuff I've read in some of the other books that I've made videos on and talked about this stuff. Alright, I got a highlighted sentence on page 33. You may say that I am only a man of lyric knowledge, he said. I'm not like Juan, my Indian brother. So he's meeting another entity, Vincente. I said to you, someday when you know how to see, this is Don Juan talking to Carlos, you should pay a visit to my friend Vincente. That's what I said. Apparently you were not listening. So Carlos went to visit Vincente because Don Juan had said that. And Don Juan wanted to know, why'd you go see him? He says, well, you told me to go see him. And he goes, I didn't tell you to see him. I said, someday when you know how to see, you should pay a visit to Vincente. So you have to learn a little bit about this sorcery and this knowledge. before you approach these people who are sorcerers or sorceresses, female, because I guess it could be quite dangerous. So there you go again with this occultism of these witchcraft people, Illuminati, Zionists, studying the Kabbalah, going up to the wall there in Jerusalem. It's King Solomon's temple, the Wailing Wall or whatever it is, and they put their head against it. Or they're at the airport with their little book out, and they're doing these incantations and all this. I hope all these Zionist Jewish folks aren't running around going, "Death to America, death to America, death to America," or something like that. Or maybe they're doing, "Bring me wealthy riches, bring me..." Because remember, I read Rabbi Marvin Antelman's book, To Eliminate the Opate. And the opate is they don't want you to believe in God. It's like a drug. Because they know if you believe in God and you talk to God, like in Jesus' name, it gives you power. And these people are afraid of that power. If you want to go get 2 books, go get To Eliminate the Opate by Rabbi Marvin Antelman, Volume 1, Volume 2. Incredible disclosure of information. I made videos of those books. And I need to review them and re-release them. So Don Juan says, apparently you were not listening. Don Vincente was a beautiful man. He seemed so frail. His strangely haunting eyes made him look almost ethereal. I asked Don Juan how a beautiful person like that could be dangerous. And Don Juan says, you should have paid him a visit when you knew enough to defend yourself. Not from him, but from the power he has harnessed, which, by the way, is not his or anybody else's. So apparently he caused those 3 beings that were harassing Carlos. It was some kind of purpose behind all that. Well, I've decided to make that a separate reality, Carlos Castaneda, video into part 1 and part 2. So what I'm going to do now is show some pictures, and then tomorrow I'll make the second part of that first 100 pages and finish the story, and show the second portion of the pictures. But anyways, this looks like the peyote. Just thought it'd be interesting to get. And apparently when, this is, again, I just went on Yahoo image site peyote, and these pictures showed up. But certainly some kind of New Age art type of stuff people see. And I don't think that's a coincidence that this is showing an Indian using the peyote buttons in these kinds of colors, as you will see. And the beings, I see all kinds of little beings with seemingly like bubbles with heads. You can see next to the Indian's head's a big eye, and a being right here on top where my finger is. And then next to the Indian's headdress is an eye. So you can go online to Yahoo image site and you'll get a link. I want to give copyright credits here. These are not my pictures. Go to this Yahoo image site. You'll find this image when you put in peyote or mezcalito, and you will see artwork like this. And apparently these are the kinds of visions. That's why they say it's so hard to describe what you see. Peyote buttons. So they chew these and they go into some kind of trance, and apparently they do it over 2 or 3 days. Tales of the Shama. Here you can see another colorful type of being. So a lot of this matches with witchcraft and ancient history of shamanic type people. Aborigines in Australia, Russia, the natives, Mongols, probably the similar religion of the Hindus and the Chinese and all their drawings. And remember, Jesus had mystical powers, and there have been prophets throughout history. So apparently there is this other world, and to speed up your metabolism, these peyote buttons will get you connected. Which, apparently, that's what woke up David Icke, the famous speaker and author of many books. And apparently, his disclosure about reptilian beings, we've been hearing a lot about, or serpent gods, we've been hearing a lot about. And you notice the eye. And again, I went to Tuscalito or Peyote Images, Yahoo image site. So Yahoo collects all these images, makes them available to the public. So I just got them there secondhand. So I suppose if it's okay for Yahoo. So these are the kind of images I found there, and they're telling me a story. And I'll tell you that story in a minute, but you can see the beings when you advance your metabolism taking these drugs. And apparently you have powers over people. You can control these interdimensional beings. If they're interdimensional, it could be right here. If I was sitting in this chair tonight taking the peyote, I would have yet these allies, these beings appear who will do my bidding. If they like me. Just pictures I found at the Tuscalito, which apparently is some kind of being you interface with when you go into the Jensen weed or the mushroom smoking or chewing the peyote buttons. And apparently it can be quite bizarre, according to these artworks that people made that are on that site. And some kind of beings are available for you to see. Just an interesting bit of research. So the color of these photos and the designs is going to reoccur in the New Age material. Coincidence? Peyote. Apparently when the Yaqui Indian takes the peyote, he can get pretty sick and see kind of strange beings. There's some kind of molecule design there. So what does it do? Now, knowing that this can happen, it says here, you have to read the signs. They told you to visit a crack in the world as a warrior. If you emerge from this cave alive, it will be as a man of knowledge. So you ask the blessing of your ally, Mescalito. That's what he says here, a little cartoon type of thing. So, taking the drug, here's an ancient or some kind of picture that was at the Mescalito peyote site. Notice the big lips from the snake-like being from his head and the eye. I suppose that would kind of freak somebody out if they took the drug and saw that creature. So these are the kind of pictures that are drawn to represent the hallucinogenic effect. And there are little creatures on there, if you see them. So it speeds up your metabolism and allows you to connect to a higher world. The teachings of Don Juan, the Yashko way of knowledge, Carlos Castaneda. So go get his book. Let's give credit here where credit is due. Not trying to take away from that. And I have one more piece of information on this video, and I'll end it, then we'll make another one with the second part of my reading from Carlos's book. I've shown this book in previous videos, but I thought the common denominator is worth noting. But the Yahushka visions. So there's this vine in Peru. I call it Ashka or Wushka, Hashka, however you say it. And this was Luis Luna and Pablo Cesar Amarillo. This was a Peruvian shaman. And a investigator from a northern university, probably an anthropologist or archaeologist. And he discovered that when the shamans took the ayahuasca vine, some kind of concoction they mix up in Peru, the shama, as it says here, the shama. One of the shamas was pretty good at drawing, so this Luis Luna brought him some art supplies. Pablo Cesar Amarillo practiced for many years as a healer in the Peruvian Amazon. Today he paints the visions he remembers from his shamanic practice and teaches young people to paint as director of the USKOAY Azar Amazon School for Painting. Professor Richard Schultz, Director, Botanical Museum, Harvard University. Luis Luna permits us to understand the unworldly psychic effects of the vine of the soul. So my point is, stuff that people are not aware of, under the influence of the ayahuasca vine drug, the shamans see images like this. You see the beings and the snakes? It's a fascinating book. So what is this other world? And what are these beings that people see? What is the occult? What is the witchcraft? What's with the snake? The reptilians? So you can get this book. I got it online at a used bookstore, fairly cheap. Fascinating to look at this stuff. Looks like anaconda snakes. So my point is, again, when I keep mentioning witchcraft, the occult, kabbalah, and we see these Indiana Jones types of rituals, when he meets the natives over there in China or India, wherever he goes, and they're doing their rituals, lowering the girl down on a grate into the lava, or whatever they're doing. Somebody I don't know beeped at me. So anyways, it's a fascinating investigation. And I just think the religious iconography of the Peruvian Shama, so they do call it a religion here. Real people, real investigation. This is a fantastic thing to read. Apparently in this book here, the pharmaceutical companies from Chicago, Detroit, wherever, were sending people down there, not necessarily this guy, I'll read some of this and make a video, to find out about some of the recipes of the medicines that the shamans would get when they went into a trance to communicate with these other entities. And come back, maybe some girl had a disease or a sickness, and he would come back and the other entity would say he'd go get this kind of vine, that kind of flour, mash it all up, maybe cook it up and then give it to her. And so the pharmaceutical companies were sending people down there to pretend to be interested in the shamans and the native history. And they were looking for the recipes for some of the cures to some diseases, which then they would take back up to the United States and patent for the pharmaceutical companies. So they got the cures and the medicines from the other world that we can't see. We can see with our human eyes, but we're not trained to see with the spiritual eyes, through the third eye. But the corporate world, the Illuminati types, were well aware what they were doing, going down there getting these medicinal medicines and then hijacking them and patenting them. And maybe that's some of the stuff that we have for pharmaceuticals today, as well as the technologies. Even Nikola Tesla said that it wasn't him. He said he saw beings. Nikola Tesla, he said, I would have dreams and images and entities talking to me. And they would go pull him off the stage to try to shut him up. And through my investigation, this has been the predominant theme of all famous people into the mystery school of Babylon, the occult, and all this knowledge, which apparently is why the Vatican has gone so much out of its way to go all over the world and destroy the libraries and places of information, shamans and natives all over the world, and probably hoarding that information in the vaults below the Vatican, as well as the Zionists having their vaults worth of information. The Freemasons, I think, are a derivative of the Zionist Talmudic Jewish folks, which may not be Jews at all, may be Khazarians north of there in the Russian area, where they still have a lot of shamanic evidence and archaeological stone huts and buildings, including the Nordic traditions and Thor and all that with their shamans. So there's nothing new here about people who, like the Stonehenge in England, and the pyramids and the Sphinx and all these hieroglyphics and these ancient things, and the arches of Baal, the devil, they're trying to put in New York and London, and open some kind of portal with CERN, with the goddess of destruction out front, putting Shiva and Kali, these goddesses of the Hindu religion, the demon destruction goddesses, on the Empire State Building, a big video, and the goat, which is a representative of the Devi, on the Hoover Dam, and George Bush reading My Pet Goat to some kids in Miami during 9/11, and that newscaster showing a picture of an owl Moloch during the Sandy Hook shooting. So I keep saying, there's something to this Kabbalistic, satanic stuff. Some kind of being or demon or gods that they worship. And their goal appears to be taking over control of all of the resources on planet Earth, water, minerals, gold, everything. And coming up with a new paradigm of a new age and new world order, as per the Bible, microchipping people, bringing about this new paradigm, which apparently is not going to be too good for we the people. So if you believe all this stuff, and you can go find the books and read it all, see the evidence for yourself. And then, of course, it makes it a lot more palatable to read the Bible and about angels and demons and all the miracles that Jesus did. This world appears to exist. But they don't want you to know that. Thank you for watching my video, Rick Miracle reporting.